Some are just psychopaths. Chinese detective in exile reveals extent of torture against Uyghurs. We took all forcibly overnight, he said. If there were hundreds of people in one county, in this area, then you had to arrest these hundreds of people. The ex-detective turned whistleblower asked to be identified only as Jiang, to protect his family members who remain in China. Kick them, beat them bruised and swollen, Jiang said, recalling how he and his colleagues used to interrogate detainees in police detention centers. Until they kneel on the floor, crying. Everyone uses different methods. Some even use a wrecking bar, or iron chains with locks, Jiang said. Police would step on the suspect's face and tell him to confess. The suspects were accused of terror offenses, said Jiang, but he believes that none of the hundreds of prisoners he was involved in arresting had committed a crime. They are ordinary people, he said. The torture in police detention centers only stopped when the suspects confessed, Jiang said. Then they were usually transferred to another facility, like a prison or an internment camp manned by prison guards.
The US State Department estimates that up to 2 million Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities have been detained in internment camps in Xinjiang since 2017. China says the camps are vocational, aimed at combating terrorism and separatism, and has repeatedly denied accusations of human rights abuses in the region. I want to reiterate that the so-called genocide in Xinjiang is nothing but a rumor backed by ulterior motives and an outright lie, said Zhao Lijian, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman, during a news conference in June. On Wednesday, officials from the Xinjiang government even introduced a man at a news conference they said was a former detainee, who denied there was torture in the camps, calling such allegations utter lies. It was unclear if he was speaking under duress. Everyone needs to hit a target. The first time Jiang was deployed to Xinjiang, he said he was eager to travel there to help defeat a terror threat he was told could threaten his country. After more than 10 years in the police force, he was also keen for promotion. He said his boss had asked him to take the post, telling him that separatist forces want to split the motherland. We must kill them all. Jiang said he was deployed 3 or 4 times from his usual post in mainland China to work in several areas of Xinjiang during the height of China's Strike Hard anti-terror campaign. Launched in 2014, the Strike Hard campaign promoted a mass detention program of the region's ethnic minorities, who could be sent to a prison or an internment camp for simply wearing a veil, growing a long beard, or having too many children. I was surprised when I went for the first time, Jiang said. There were security checks everywhere. Many restaurants and places are closed. Society was very intense. During the routine overnight operations, Jiang said they would be given lists of names of people to round up, as part of orders to meet official quotas on the numbers of Uyghurs to detain. It's all planned, and it has a system, Jiang said. Everyone needs to hit a target. If anyone resisted arrest, the police officers would hold the gun against his head and say, "Do not move. If you move, you will be killed." He said teams of police officers would also search people's houses and download the data from their computers and phones. Another tactic was to use the area's neighborhood committee to call the local population together for a meeting with the village chief, before detaining them en masse. Describing the time as a combat period, Jiang said officials treated Xinjiang like a war zone, and police officers were told that Uyghurs were enemies of the state. He said it was common knowledge among police officers that 900,000 Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities were detained in the region in a single year. Jiang said if he had resisted the process, he would have been arrested. 2. Some are just psychopaths inside the police detention centers. The main goal was to extract a confession from detainees, with sexual torture being one of the tactics, Jiang said. If you want people to confess, you use the electric baton with 2 sharp tips on top, Jiang said. We would tie 2 electrical wires on the tips and set the wires on their genitals while the person is tied up. He admitted he often had to play bad cop during interrogations, but said he avoided the worst of the violence, unlike some of his colleagues. Some people see this as a job, some are just psychopaths, he said. One very common measure of torture and dehumanization was for guards to order prisoners to rape and abuse the new male inmates, Jiang said. Abduwalia, a 48-year-old Uyghur scholar from Xinjiang, said he was detained on August 19, 2013, when police picked him up at the Uyghur kindergarten he had opened to teach young children their native language. They then drove him to his nearby house, which he said was surrounded by police carrying rifles. On his first night in a police detention center in the city of Kashgar, Uyghur says he was gang-raped by more than a dozen Chinese inmates, who had been directed to do this by 3 or 4 prison guards who also witnessed the assault. The prison guards, they asked me to take off my underwear before telling him to bend over, he said. "Don't do this," I cried. "Please don't do this." He said he passed out during the attack and woke up surrounded by his own vomit and urine. "I saw the flies, just like flying around me," Ayub said. "I found that the flies are better than me. Because no one can torture them, and no one can rape them. I saw that those guys laughing at me, and he's so weak," he said. "I heard those words." He says the humiliation continued the next day, when the prison guards asked him, "Did you have a good time?" He said he was transferred from the police detention center to an internment camp, and was eventually released on November 20, 2014, after being forced to confess to a crime of illegal fundraising. His time in detention came before the wider crackdown in the region, but it reflects some of the alleged tactics used to suppress the ethnic minority population which Uyghur people had complained about for years. Now living in Norway, Ayub is still teaching and also writing Uyghur language books for children, to try to keep his culture alive. But he says the trauma of his torture will stay with him forever. "It's the scar in my heart," he said. "I will never forget. They hung us up and beat us." Omer Bakali, who now lives in the Netherlands, is also struggling with the long-term legacy of his experiences within the camp system.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.